Getting a DMA or Doctor of Musical Arts degree was one of the most challenging and rewarding experiences of my life. Today on LIMM, we'll discuss what exactly is involved to get a DMA degree. So before we start, let's get some royalty-free classical music going. Hold on. That doesn't sound very good. Let's try that again. Much better. Now, on to the main event. A Doctor of Musical Arts degree is usually a terminal degree that combines both applied elements with academic study. Most of the time, the applied elements are performance, such as me with piano performance, and academic subjects may include theory, history, and other seminars. A DMA is typically not to be confused with a PhD, which involves more research and is more academically focused, such as with music theory or musicology, while the DMA keeps the applied performing aspect of the field. Typically, a DMA takes 3 to 4 years to complete, but this will vary from school to school. Some schools take up to 7 years, while others take as short as 3 years. Requirements for completing a DMA degree also varies from school to school, but typically include a number of solo performances, academic classes, a large research project, as well as a final comprehensive exam. Simply put, a DMA is typically required for most college teaching positions and is an indication that someone is qualified in terms of performing ability and academic knowledge. For me, I always felt that playing the piano involves so much more than just playing the piano. And with my academic background and analytical nature, I have a lot more to give back and share in addition to simply giving performances. I think that's also part of the reason why I started this YouTube channel. Classical music can be accessible to everyone with a more open attitude from musicians and non-musicians alike, working together to break these barriers with mutual respect. Another reason why I wanted to get a DMA was because I just wanted to learn more about music. Learning and sharing knowledge is one of mankind's noblest goals, and I realized it is impossible to learn completely and everything about music, but it would be great to seize the opportunity to learn as much as I can while I still had the chance, and to be able to share that later on with others. My DMA audition at CIM was actually my second audition at the Institute, since I previously auditioned for my master's there. I had a really pleasant time with the master's audition and with the school experience in general, and I decided it would be a good idea to explore getting a DMA at CIM. As a preface, different institutions have different protocols for auditions, and if you're applying anywhere, you should take a very close look at their requirements. DMA auditions at CIM are split across 2 days. The first day was almost exactly as I remembered it for my master's audition. I took some theory placement exams, went around the practice rooms, and had my playing audition, which I'll get to in a second. The only thing different about this first day of my auditions for my DMA, compared to my master's audition, was that I had an interview with 2 faculty members, one theory professor at CIM and one musicologist from Case Western Reserve University, the academic partner for CIM. I thought the 2 people interviewing me were really quite nice and were really interested in my non-traditional music background, first having studied mathematics in my undergrad and moving on to piano for my graduate studies. I ended up getting to know both of my interviewers pretty well during my studies, and they were both super supportive and kind. The last thing that I did during day 1 of auditions was the actual playing part. In the few years prior to my audition, I really made strides to try to be as genuine of a musician as possible, understanding the subtle intricacies of the musical score and trying to find a balance between performer individuality and a respect for the composer. I think this mentality had sort of like a positive feedback loop with all of the Schubert I had been playing. My program was intentionally not very flashy. For a classical sonata, I chose Mozart's Piano Sonata in F major, Koszul 332, because I loved the piece and I knew I could create something sublime with its simplicity. For my romantic work, I chose Schumann's Kreisleriana, a fiery work that shows technique and spirit. For my 20th century work, I chose Ravel's Gaspard de la Nuit, which again is pretty subtle in Ondine and Le Gibet, but in which I can show a wide variety of colors. I also had a Bach prelude and fugue, and several etudes as well. The audition itself was really Relaxing? It was short, only about 10 or 15 minutes long, since there were so many people auditioning. Also, a lot of the piano faculty were away traveling, so only a couple of faculty members were live in the audience, and I also had to play it in front of a camera to send the recording to those who weren't able to make it. I always play better if I feel comfortable, and I'm definitely glad that I felt super comfortable during that audition. Afterwards, I settled back into my hotel room and started preparing for day 2. At CIM, prospective DMA candidates stick around for a second day of auditions where they take history and theory placement exams. I think history was first for me, and it was definitely the one I was more worried about. I had all of my history notes and textbook back in the hotel room, and I was busy cramming any bits of last information into my head during that last evening before day 2. I don't remember exactly how long the history exam was or how many components there were. I think there was some listening identification, short answers, and longer answers as well, but I honestly think due to my mega stress that I kind of blocked this moment completely out of my memories. All I remember was that I felt like I had passed after the exam, but maybe not with flying colors, and that was okay in my book. I knew I could make it all up in the theory exam. I've always been more comfortable with theory than with history, going back to my undergrad days where I studied music theory for fun. What CIM had me do during this exam was to analyze a short piano piece in whatever way that I could, while also providing a cohesive thesis. I was honestly really thrilled that it was a piano piece that I had actually played before, and decided right then and there to take a calculated risk with my exam. My philosophy has always been that theory and analysis leads to performance and intuition, and the other way around too. Intuition also leads into theory. So for this essay, in addition to the basics of structure, harmony, and phrasing, I decided to discuss how these theoretical elements could influence one's interpretation and performance of the work. After waiting a few months, I learned that CIM really liked my audition, and I really liked them in return. So I decided to attend CIM for my DMA. CIM's DMA program lasts for 3 years, although some candidates take an extra, unofficial 4th year to finish up all of their requirements. These requirements include passing history and theory classes, playing 3 solo recitals, and giving a lecture recital consisting of both research and performance, as well as taking a comprehensive exam in both theory and history. Again, every institution is different with their requirements, so if you're considering applying for a DMA, please double check with each specific institution for what you need. I moved to Cleveland without knowing anyone, but quickly found friends in my studio who I still keep in touch with today. I also realized how small CIM's DMA program was, across all the instruments and disciplines, so piano, strings, winds, brass, voice, composition. Only 2 DMA candidates matriculated to CIM my year, me and a trombonist. My trombonist friend was super nice, super funny, and we quickly hit it off as sort of the DMA newbies. And honestly, it was really comforting just to have someone else in the same boat as I was. For this video, I'm going to spend more time talking about the non-piano playing aspects of my DMA experience, but I'd like to extend my deepest gratitudes to Ms. Peck, Dr. Shapiro, and Mr. Babayan for being constant sources of inspiration and support. Thank you so much. I had a very ambitious program my first year of studying, bringing the Hammerklavier and the Opus 90 Schubert impromptus in the fall, and working towards a concert of the Prokofiev Vision Fugitif, Scriabin Fantasy, and Schubert's Sonata in A major D959 in the spring. Academics were pretty nice, and I didn't feel too uneasy with anything, probably due to my applied math academic background. I took some Schenkerian theory, which was really interesting and pretty useful in performance actually, especially if you're aware of all these motivic parallelisms in the surface level and deep level of the music. The one class that really stood out was the bibliography course that I took. This course is meant to be an introduction and overview of the music, research, and methodology options for graduate students. I was in a class with my trombonist buddy, as well as all of the incoming PhD music students from Case Western. The class was useful as I learned about the various online and physical resources for musical research, but I also think it was meant to be kind of an academic hazing of sorts. Assignments took many hours to complete, which again wasn't too unfamiliar with me because I was used to spending dozens of hours doing applied math problem sets every week. But in the history and humanities, they're kind of less of my wheelhouse, so the hours spent researching for this class and writing papers was a little bit painful, but also extremely beneficial. The first year was extremely busy and went extremely well, and I felt really good going into year 2. I had decided that the previous summer that I would try to graduate in 3 years. I had heard that many of the DMA candidates save their lecture recital and their comprehensive exams for an unofficial year 4 after they had finished all their academic requirements, performances, and classes. I thought that with good planning I could get it done in 3 years, and thus I wanted to do my lecture recital in year 2. You can watch my lecture recital here on YouTube on Schubert's Fantasy in F minor, and my own transcription of that nonetheless. And I'll link both the lecture and the performance of it down below. Honestly, it was quite challenging to have a focused idea of what I wanted to say in the lecture portion. I was kind of all over the place at first, but finally settled down to the concept of memory in Schubert. I continued taking history and theory courses, but the one course that stuck out to me in year 2 was my DMA seminar class, which basically involved a bunch of reading about music and culture, both present and past, to get a more global and philosophical understanding of why people play music. I started the class together with my trombonist buddy since we were the only 2 incoming DMA students of our class. However, he had to take some time off to be with his family, so I ended up being the only one in this seminar class, as well as the only graduating DMA student of my class year. Being the only person in the class was both great and terrifying. I had hundreds of pages of reading a week, and since there was no one else in the class to talk to, I had to spend so much time being super meticulous with all the details. Readings took twice as long as they normally did because I would take notes on everything. But I had a great time talking with my professor, and he was very instrumental in helping me refine my musical goals and purpose to help share music and make it more accessible to anyone who may be interested. Year 2 was particularly tough on me pianistically. I suffered a freak shoulder injury around November of that year that lasted for about a year before getting back to normal and being pain-free. I don't know what exactly happened, but I basically woke up one morning, I couldn't move my shoulder, so I probably slept in a terrible position that caused this year-long injury. I was working on Rock 3 at the time, and basically had to stop because of the injury and pain. In addition to the lecture recital on Schubert's F minor Fantasy, I also gave a solo recital in which I played John Mustow's Concert Rags, Schubert's Wanderer Fantasy, and Franck's Violin Sonata with my good friend and performance partner Ruslan Apostolov. Honestly, I know I probably could have done more pianistically my second year, but the shoulder injury not only made it physically limiting to play, but it also drained me of my optimism and drive psychologically. Fortunately, my new roommate and good friend Nick was a tremendous support throughout the year, and I managed to figure out how to get my shoulder right and recover correctly for year 3. One fortunate development in year 3 was that the theory department had been impressed for my work and decided to offer me a position teaching music theory to Case Western students. Working with these bright, passionate individuals has been one of the highlights of my life, and I'm fortunate to be able to continue working with them this upcoming fall. My schedule also suddenly looked really tight with the addition of teaching. I taught and graded, attended and did work with my own classes, practiced the last 3 Beethoven sonatas, and began preparing for my comprehensive exams. I was basically doing the work of 2 people in one person's body. In order to graduate, I needed to take my history and theory comprehensive exams. The Institute had just changed their approach to the history exam, and I had the opportunity to choose 3 topics to be examined on: keyboard sonatas prior to 1800, Franz Schubert as a whole, and Ravel's Gaspard de la Nuit. This approach made studying for the topics both easier and more difficult. Easier in that all DMA students now know approximately what area the prompts will be in, but more difficult in that we needed to study way more in depth with each individual subject. In addition, I was the first person to take the new theory exam, which is longer and more challenging than the previous format. Now the theory exam would be 6 hours long, with 3 hours dedicated to a single analysis of a piece, 1 hour on terminology, and 2 hours to do about a half dozen mini analyses. As expected, I was way more nervous preparing for the history part than the theory part. I checked out over 100 books from the library and spent almost 3 months working my way through as many of those as possible, while also making a gigantic online note sheet of over 100 or 200 pages to access at any time. Leading up to the exams, I was having panic attacks actually about once a week, where I wouldn't be able to sleep and basically thought that I didn't know any history at all. And after each one of these moments, I had to pick myself up the next day and basically plow through and continue working forward studying for the history exam. I was less worried about theory and began studying for it about 3 or 4 weeks in advance. I went through my notes from the last few years and taking special care to study counterpoint, small forms, Schenkerian analysis, and post-tonal theory. After months of preparation, I took my exam mid-February. The first day was 6 hours of theory, and I felt super comfortable throughout. The large 3-hour analysis was on Hugo Wolf's Carvoche, which I found super fascinating. I thoroughly enjoyed digging deep in the piece and seeing how the little motivic and harmonic aspects alongside the text help create this tragic emotional fabric. I found the mini analyses to be especially challenging. I had only around 20 minutes to do each one, which included not only taking time to analyze the work, but also taking the time to write out a few paragraphs. I found myself running short on time, but somehow managed to finish. One embarrassing moment was that in my exhaustion at the 5-hour and 55-minute mark of the exam, I wrote that a phrase had an irregular 7 measures of music rather than the standard 8. But in my haste and delusion, I just simply couldn't count to 8. It was 8 measures, was perfectly normal. I was just really dumb. With that, I finished my theory exam and began last-minute preparations for my history exam the following day. The history exam was only 3 hours long for 3 essays, and I found myself in time trouble almost immediately. I wanted to write so much more because I'd prepared so much, but I had to constantly try to find an efficient path saying my arguments while fighting the clock constantly. Honestly, after the exam, I thought I had completely bombed it. I felt rushed and stressed throughout. But after I cooled off and actually read what I wrote, I saw that it was actually pretty decent, and it was definitely much better than I had felt throughout the exam. A couple of weeks after my written exams, the pandemic hit and everything had to shut down. That meant all of my classes were held online, I was teaching online, and also that my follow-up oral comprehensive exams, where I had the opportunity to defend and to expound upon my written essays in front of a panel of faculty members, were postponed. This was definitely a stressful and scary time for everyone, but fortunately my girlfriend came up to live with me, and I don't know if I could have lasted another 3 months living by myself. I had just spent the previous 3 months holed up studying and preparing really hard for the comprehensive exams, and another 3 months of holding up would have been disastrous. Eventually, the DMA committee scheduled my oral exams online, and I passed. I continued having piano lessons in the apartment since I had a piano there, and through all of this social distancing and the pandemic, I somehow got my DMA. This was definitely not how I thought it would end, but I'm glad that thanks to technology and safe social distancing practices that I was able to earn it at the end. For those of you who made it this far in the video, thank you so much. Your support really means a lot. If you want to help out the channel even more, please hit the like button and please consider subscribing for more musical content. My journey these past 3 years has been incredibly fulfilling. I've met some really great friends, colleagues, and mentors who have been instrumental for my growth and for helping me share music with others, either through playing, in the classroom, or even here on this YouTube channel. I hope with all of these experiences, I'll be able to help expand the classical music community to a wider audience. Until next time, keep it logical. Take care, everyone.